Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 4 of our reading of. I'm just check my notes here. Going to part 4. Okay. Part 4 of our reading of Guinevere. I know it's kind of shiny there. By Sharan Newman. This book is copyright 1981. I get the right page up here. Copyright 1981. And I have the author's expressed written permission to read this book on my YouTube channel. I am also going to say that this book is still for sale, along with the Chessboard Queen and Guinevere Evermore. I'm going to have to check and make sure those are right, but it'll be right in the description. It's been a while since I've read from this book, and so let's see. In the last episode, we talked about Gustavus and some of his history. He is thought to be a saint, and that he hears voices, but Guinevere can actually see the spirits that hover around Sir Gustavus. I think that was his name. Let me see. Well, I don't know. Anyways, and in the last episode, we ended with Guinevere's brothers coming home. So that's always a plus. Giraldus, sorry. I said Gustavus, it's Giraldus. Sorry, I got my names mixed up. So yeah, there are spirits that hover around Giraldus, and they don't look all that angelic because Guinevere can see them. Anyways, in the last episode, Guinevere's brothers came galloping home. So let's go. Guinevere's shriek echoed all the way up the hill and into the compound, where Gwendolyn was checking to see that the linen was being properly aired. Her sigh was half fear and half annoyance. Now what had that child done? Then the cheering began from the guards at the gate, and she heard the clatter of horses in the courtyard. She dropped the towels and ran to the front court. Sunlight bounced off the polished armor, nearly blinding her. They were home, her beautiful sons, all of them together, all safe. She stretched out her arms to them joyfully. She found herself checking them over much as she did at their birth. Hands, feet, arms, and legs all accounted for. Her last worry disappeared. "Mother," Matthew cried as he lifted her in a bear hug. "Why were you not out at the gate to greet us? Have we been away so long that you no longer care about us?" Guinevere was happy to see us, although I hardly recognize her. "She is growing up, too. Have you found her a husband yet? I remember, Lieutenant, that you once knew the proper greeting for one of my rank," Gwendolyn answered sternly. Then she relented and held him close to her heart. "I'm heart glad to see you, my son." Mark and John pulled her away from him, laughing. "You favor our older brother still. Have you no greeting for us?" "Of course I do, my proud cockerels. When you have finished strutting in your armor for the delight of the maids and boys, you are mightily proud of your trappings, children." "Children," Mark scoffed. "We are all grown men now, mother, tried and proved in battle. If we are proud, it is of the honor of our name and family, not of this rusty metal. I see no rust on your helmet, but perhaps the reason for that is not pride in your armor, but rather the discipline of our cousin Cador. Come with me, brothers." Matthew laughed. When will we learn not to fence words with our mother? I have never won a battle with her in my life." Gwendolyn smiled as she watched the boys striding off to the stables, their arms lightly placed on each other's shoulders. It was as if they could be, it was as it should be, and she was pleased beyond telling with her strong soldier sons. They were truly hers. She gloated more than the children of any of her friends could be to them. She had carried them all proudly, refusing to go into seclusion as custom declared, and had suffered the internal kicks and punches with delight. Suffered their internal kicks and punches with delight. I am growing Roman children, she had told her husband. So she had shot her sons forth into the world, each one squalling bravery. She had given Flora the care of them for part of the time, but she insisted that they be kept near her always. She had refused even a wet nurse. How will they grow strong and wise on peasant milk, made from beer and barley bread? I will feed them myself with milk from good red wine and meat. They traveled with her everywhere, and she nursed them as she rode. She laughed at those who assured her that she would ruin her figure and her health. Her friends respected her position too much to laugh at her publicly, but they privately speculated on what would happen to children raised so loosely when women met at their homes or at the few remaining baths. The conversation always drifted from complaints on the degeneration of society to Gwendolyn with her brood of babies. 3 sons in 6 years. They seem to be everywhere children shouldn't be, one barren matron would cluck. My dear, these boys have the run of the estate. The baby, whichever one that is, crawls about on the floor when there are guests to dinner, and Leodegrance only grins and warns you not to step on him. She should never keep them at home with her, another would moan. The first winter illness will take them all. How well I know. And she would sniff lugubriously. That would certainly be a fine stop to the Roman army she seems intent on building. It appears to me that she is determined to replace the whole 12th Legion by herself. If she continues like this, she may get delusions of imperial splendor. I wonder that Leodegrance allows it. Well, it's obvious why he doesn't stop her. All those children. You know what men are like. And here the conversation would take another turn. The gossip never bothered Gwendolyn when she heard of it, as of course she did. It was always the duty of some dear friend to inform her of what people were saying. It may even have occurred to her that one day one of her sons might try for the purple. Strange things had happened, but after Mark there had been no more children for many years. And then, when the hopes were almost gone, there was a 4th child at last, Guinevere, silent, even facing her first breath. She hadn't cried out at all, but had simply opened her mouth and taken a long, gasping sigh. Then she opened her great green eyes. She had focused intently on the face of Flora, who was holding her, enraptured with awe. It seemed to the old woman that the wisdom and mystery she had worshipped all her life lay in that deep, clear gaze. The silence was so complete that Gwendolyn began to panic. "Bring him to me," she commanded. "Why do you wait? Why doesn't he cry? Is the child dead, deformed? Tell me at once." Flora wrapped the unresisting child in swaddling and brought her to lie beside her mother. "It's a girl," she breathed. Gwendolyn sensed a strange tone of wonder in her voice. "That was to be expected, I suppose. I can't always have boys. If she's strong and healthy, I see no reason to grieve. Take off those linens and let me examine her." But Flora was reluctant to give up the baby. She appeared almost reverent and refused to take her eyes from the baby's face. "She is not like the others," the nurse whispered. "There is a light about her, a divine aura. I believe she was sent to us by—" She clutched the child too tightly as a fearful thought occurred to her. The girl finally cried out, Stop your superstitious nonsense and bring me the child, Flora." Gwendolyn hardly ever used such a tone of command. "We are Christians and civilized, rational beings, and we do not believe in signs. You know I have no divining or prophesying over my children. Even Merlin knows better than to try to tell me their future. They will be whatever God and their own abilities decide, and I leave that to them. Flora obeyed. She put the baby on a pillow next to her mother. Flora obeyed. She put the baby on a pillow next to her mother's head and left the room. Gwendolyn didn't notice. She was filled with the wonder of her daughter. The crying had stopped, but it had done the baby good. Her face was a healthy pink, and the wispy golden hair shone above her red scalp. Aura indeed, Gwendolyn laughed and examined the baby further. Her eyes were remarkable. The color so pure for a newborn. They were just the color of the first spring leaves, a soft yellow green. Gwendolyn checked her hands, uncurled the fingers to see their length. She ran her hands down the bent legs and arms, turning the baby over, looking for birthmarks or blemishes. There was nothing. She was as perfect as any new human being could be. What a fool Flora is, Gwendolyn whispered. You are no angel or goddess, but a beautiful Roman child. You will have my mother's nature, Guinevere, and we will raise you to be a brave, strong woman, just as she was. Gwendolyn remembered all these things as she watched her daughter racing to join her brothers on their way to the stables. Guinevere was far from spiritual or even dignified as she hopped along beside John. He was obviously teasing her about something, for Gwendolyn blushed and tried to reach his hand to knock his helmet off. For Guinevere blushed and tried to reach his head to knock his helmet off. He swept her up, and she climbed to his shoulders, enjoying the view. Her laughter sparkled through the still hot air. Can you spare a greeting for an old cousin, Gwendolyn? Or do your children take up all your time as they do all your heart? Gwendolyn came back to the present with a start. Merlin, dear cousin, she exclaimed, I am delighted to see you here. Our blessed Geraldus has been awaiting your arrival for days, but I see that he too is off with the boys. Never mind, he will soon return. Until then, you must make do with my poor greeting. You honor our household now that you are the sage advisor of two kings. Your laurels become you, do they not? She paused and looked more closely at him. He was outwardly robust, but his eyes were veiled by worry and sorrow, and his jaw was more firmly set than when they had been children together, or even at their last meeting. She linked her arm in his as they strode to the house. Whatever your cares are now, let them rest while you are with us. Forget Saxons, Irish, and Picts. Turn away from the feuding lords. We will banish them all. She laughed, and his face softened as he smiled in return. Dearest Gwendolyn, I do not worry about the Saxon raiders or the mulish country lords. I leave that to the fighting men and the diplomats. There are deeper cares within my heart, but if they are more serious, they are also more distant. I will take your advice and rest a while with you. I have a mind to hunt with my old friend Leodegrance and his pack of cubs. And an evening in your hall is always a welcome change from the conversation of men who know nothing but tales of battle and glory, and can hardly read their own names. I didn't know that such men dared speak to you, Merlin, Gwendolyn laughed. They all seem to be too much afraid that you will enchant them to have much to do with you. He returned her smile. It's true. I see their hands flickering as I passed to ward off my evil glance. But some of the mightier lords feel that discourse with a wizard enhances their social standing as well as proves their courage. So I listen night after night to rambling talk of armor and horses, women and feuds. It will be a joy to listen again to the children's tutor. What's her name? The way he goes on about Virgil and Seneca. You would think that he had been old friends of his. I doubt that 1 in 100 of these so-called Roman soldiers knows of the fall of Troy or the founding of Rome. Arthur and I have discussed this many times. It grieves us to realize that these men have forgotten their past. They know the names of their ancestors, to the 13th generation, but they know nothing about them. Those who truly are of Roman blood can't even pronounce their names correctly. But now we are spending all our strength simply defending Britain. There is no time for history lessons. Is the war going so badly then? Gwendolyn asked. She glanced abruptly towards the stable, where rowdy laughter could be heard. No, as a matter of fact, it's going very well. You may calm yourself, cousin. I am aware that you don't like to hear of my visions, but I can assure you that Britain will remain ours for our lifetime at least. Arthur is an able general and a fine man. He is doing what no one thought could be done. He is unifying the clans of the north and the settlers in the south and west. As you know, they normally spend their time fighting each other. Now they march side by side for love of him. Gwendolyn seized her chance. We have wondered about this Arthur. Giraldus even has told us only a little, and the stories of him often seem to contain as much myth as the ones we hear of you. I have heard that you know his family. She waited for a reply. Merlin sighed. Yes, I did. His parents are dead. They were unable to care for him even before, so when he was born, I took him from the arms of the nurse and gave him to old Hector to raise as a foster son. He spent his whole life there except for the times I took him traveling. Now you know as much as he knows. You haven't even told the boy his own parentage? When the time comes, he will be told, as will you all, but it is not necessary to face yet, and I would wait. A frightening thought flashed into Gwendolyn's mind, something in his voice, perhaps unlike Merlin, she never listened to her intuition. She suddenly realized that they were still standing in the courtyard. Forgive me, dear one. I said you should rest and not be bothered, and I have kept you here standing and answering questions. Come, I will show you your room myself. I'll send for hot water and towels too. We've had to close the baths during the drought. We haven't enough cold water to mix with the hot from the springs. However, we can give you a hip bath in your room. Not as pleasant, I know, but adequate for washing off the dust of your journey. When you are rested, come join us on the patio. We have a fine view of the sunset on the mountains, and Pincerna has been overseeing an exquisite dinner in your honor. They arrived at his room. It was well furnished and beautifully decorated. Merlin's smile widened as he saw the well-stuffed mattress and soft pillow. He gave Gwendolyn a quick hug of delight. I may not make it to dinner, he chuckled. See that you do, or Pincerna's heart will break, she answered and closed the door behind him. They had parted happily, but once alone again, they each sighed. Gwendolyn shook herself and hurried to see about the water, and Merlin gratefully threw himself upon the bed. Guinevere's joy, however, was totally untempered. Her brothers were home. She had felt recently that being the only child at home gave her too much attention of the wrong sort. Now her strong adult, laughing brothers were here at last. There would be hunting and riding and rowdy dinners that lasted far into the night. There would be singing and pranks again, as it had been before they went away, all so young to fight, and she gloated she could again be spoiled and petted and not treated as a young woman of rank who must mind her behavior. Fairly bubbling over in her happiness as she pranced along after them to the stables, she didn't notice the bitter, admiring look Kate gave them as they entered. It was dark inside and almost cool. The smell of horses and hay struck them at once. All four breathed it in happily. The smell was uniquely that of their own stable, their own horses. They stopped a moment until their eyes grew to show them the shapes in the dark. Guinevere was still jumping up and down. Have I grown? She teased John. You haven't seen me since last fall. I've grown a lot. I know it. Soon I'll be as tall as you. Then you'll have no more rides on my back, he grinned. You already weigh more than my saddle and armor combined. No use, Gwen. You are a child no more. but he didn't really believe it. He laughed as he hugged her tightly and lifted her as he had all her life. Suddenly he stopped. His expression changed almost to one of alarm. Gently he put her down in the doorway so that the sunlight struck her and shone through her summer-thin gown. "Oh, Guinevere," he sighed, "you have grown." She blushed. She was vaguely aware that her body was not as straight and flat as it had been even a few months before, but the change had been too gradual for any eye but Flora's to see. Now she saw her brothers looking at her as if she were a stranger. She felt a chill run through her. Her eyes began to fill. John saw this and smiled tenderly. "Dear one, I don't love you less for turning almost into a woman while my back was turned. It only took me by surprise. I suppose I felt that you must be some sort of fairy child who would never change. Brothers, Mark, Matthew, come. We must greet our sister again. The child we left last autumn has been transformed during her absence. May I present to you the Lady Guinevere." They stared at her a moment. "God's blood, I never noticed," Matthew exclaimed. "Do you want to make me feel old? I felt myself a man already when you were born. But in truth, you'll soon be of an age for suitors. Well, you have 3 stout warriors to defend your honor. I place my sword at your command." With a flourish of mock pomposity, he drew his short battle sword and laid it at her feet. The others followed. Guinevere refused to be intimidated. She adjusted her imaginary cloak and veil and extended her hand to them. They were teasing her again, and this she could deal with, as she had all her life. This was a challenge in their eyes, even though they loved her so very much. "I accept your valorous offer, and give you my tokens to carry with you into battle in my name." She looked about for something to give them. She was wearing very little on this hot day, and had just been made apparent. And no jewelry or scarves. Her hair had tumbled down again, and she quickly tugged at it to get 3 strands. "I have only these 3 golden threads to give, but they were gathered at great cost." She rubbed the place on her scalp where she had pulled. "I hope," she added, in a more normal voice, "that you appreciate this gift, remembering all the strands you had for nothing in the days when you pulled my braids, when pulling my braids was one of your favorite sports." "We will cherish them to the death," vowed Mark, with a melodramatic whap of his chest. "Oops, I dropped mine in the straw. Well, give me another, dear sister, and I'll cherish that one to the death." Happily they finished seeing to the horses and returned to the house. Kate spent an hour that afternoon searching in the straw until he found one long golden strand. Carefully he placed it in the leather bag around his neck, where he kept his treasures. Whenever Guinevere thought of that summer in later years, she always saw it ringed in gold and silver. Colors were brighter, music more touching, and the happiness was so intense she could taste it. It was the last summer before, she would say. Before what? Someone would always ask. Before everything. Her eyes would then cloud, and the questioner would know to ask no more. But at that time she didn't know that it was the last anything, and wouldn't have understood if someone had told her. So she simply enjoyed it with all her heart. She wanted nothing more in her life than to live like this, with her parents and brothers, spoiled and loved forever. They were content, too, for her to remain so, They were content, too, for her to remain so, for to her family, Guinevere was the essence of all their dreams. A happy, innocent creature, beautiful and untouched by the grief and conflict outside her narrow world. There were many riding expeditions into and through the woods. Everyone made so much noise on these that it was no wonder they saw nothing but themselves. Guinevere's dreams became vague, and the strange longing she had felt ebbed. They went on picnics and had great banquets that lasted until the summer dawn. Giraldus more than earned his keep at these. He knew more legends and songs than one could hear in a month of banquets. His honeyed voice carried them into whatever tale he told, making them laugh or weep without even realizing it. Sometimes Gwendolyn wondered if these stories were not too secular for a saint. However, her duty as a hostess was foremost in her mind, and there was no doubt that the guests were mightily entertained. The only shadow in Guinevere's world that summer was Merlin. She couldn't overcome the feeling that he disliked her, although his manners towards her was always irreproachable. It was a new feeling which made her very uncomfortable when he was around. She resented his eyes when they looked at her. She felt she was under examination. Thankfully, he rarely joined the group of young people, preferring to stay with Gwendolyn or ride with Leodegrance as he oversaw the estate, or even sit by the hour with Tenantius, arguing points of grammar so intently that the old teacher began to feel there was some hope for the country yet. Everyone was fond of him but Guinevere. But with so much to do and so many friends, she rarely let him upset her. To Guinevere's brothers, Merlin had always been a figure of excitement and mystery. His mother and Gwendolyn's had been cousins, and therefore he was family, part of a tight unit against whom nothing might be said. But even in this remote and sheltered corner of Britain, they had heard strange stories of him. His unknown siring, the terrifying string of prophecies he had spun for Vortigern, which had all come true as far as anyone knew. Vortigern had been defeated, although the Saxons he had invited into Britain were still rampaging through the country. There were stories of Merlin dabbling in black magic to help King Uther and his lecheries, but no one knew much about that. Some even said that Merlin was responsible for the giant's dance, the circle of stones in the middle of the great plain to the east. About this, Guinevere's brothers questioned him, and he replied that it wasn't true. He knew not how the stones had come there, nor their purpose. This didn't stop Matthew, Mark, and John from believing other stories. They wondered what had happened to him after the battle of Arderydd, when his whole family had been killed, including his uncle King Gwyndelaw. By listening at the door late at night, they had heard the story of how he was seen wandering among the bodies, raving into the wind as mad as a loon. He disappeared after that and wasn't seen again for over a year. Even Gwendolyn had been unable to find out from him where he had been or how his reason had been restored. We are going to stop it right there. We're going to put this bookmark in. We got to page 73. We have been reading from Guinevere by Sharan Newman. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.